students, I want all the students to open your English literature supplementary textbook, that is Footprints Without Feet. Okay, just a small discussion session. What do you understand by the phrase footprints without feet? कैसा लगता है आपको फ्रेज? अच्छा लगता है, बुरा लगता है?
यस मैम, इंटरेस्टिंग चैप्टर इसमें रहते हैं मैम. इंटरेस्टिंग चैप्टर है.
ओके, बेसिकली आपकी जो सप्लीमेंट्री रीडर की जो कवर पेजेस को होते हैं ना, क्या क्वाइट मिस्टीरियस, मिस्ट्री होती है इसमें. पता है क्यों होती है? क्योंकि ये जो फ्रेजेस यहाँ पर मेंशन होते हैं ना, आइदर इसका कोई चैप्टर आपके बुक में होता है. So it is very quite interesting.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes.
So, let us open to page number 1, A Triumph of Surgery. I will share the screen. Okay. Extra marks. Can you see my screen, students?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am. Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Soon you students will also get an extra marks account, so you can also see the e-content. Okay, we will be providing. हाँ, तो हम पे करके आपको देने वाले हैं फर्स्ट ग्रुप स्टूडेंट.
तो मैम
क्या?
No, ma'am. Nothing.
Okay, चलो. Let me start. Open your textbooks, okay? I will play the video.
A Triumph of Surgery by James Herriot. I was really worried about Tricky this time. I had pulled up my car when I saw him in the street with his mistress, and I was shocked at his appearance. He had become hugely fat, like a bloated sausage with a leg at each corner. His eyes, bloodshot and rheumy, stared straight ahead, and his tongue lolled from his jaws. Mrs. Pumphrey hastened to explain. He was so listless, Mr. Herriot. He seemed to have no energy. I thought he must be suffering from malnutrition. So I have been giving him some little extras between meals to build him up. Some malt and cod liver oil and a bowl of Horlicks at night to make him sleep. Nothing much, really. And did you cut down on the sweet things as I told you? Oh, I did for a bit, but he seemed to be so weak, I had to relent. He does love cream cakes and chocolates so I can't bear to refuse him. I looked down again at the little dog. That was the trouble. Tricky's only fault was greed. He had never been known to refuse food. He would tackle a meal at any hour of the day or night. And I wondered about all the things Mrs. Pumphrey hadn't mentioned. Are you giving him plenty of exercise? Well, he has his little walks with me, as you can see, but Hodgkin the gardener has been down with lumbago, so there has been no ring throwing lately. I tried to sound severe. Now, I really mean this. If you don't cut his food right down and give him more exercise, he is going to be really ill. You must harden your heart and keep him on a very strict diet. Mrs. Pumphrey wrung her hands. Oh, I will, Mr. Herriot. I'm sure you are right, but it is so difficult, so very difficult. She set off, head down, along the road, as if determined to put the new regime into practice immediately. I watched their progress with growing concern. Tricky was tottering along in his little tweed coat. He had a whole wardrobe of these coats for the cold weather and a raincoat for the wet days. He struggled on, drooping in his harness. I thought it wouldn't be long before I heard from Mrs. Pumphrey. The expected call came within a few days.
Please,
Mrs.
students,
Pumphrey was
refer your
distraught.
text as well.
Tricky would
As
eat
their
nothing, refused even his favorite dishes, and besides, he had bouts of vomiting. He spent all his time lying on a rug, panting. Didn't want to go for walks, didn't want to do anything. I had made my plans in advance. The only way was to get Tricky out of the house for a period. I suggested that he be hospitalized for about a fortnight to be kept under observation. The poor lady almost swooned. She was sure he would pine and die if he did not see her every day. But I took a firm line. Tricky was very ill, and this was the only way to save him. In fact, I thought it best to take him without delay, and followed by Mrs. Pumphrey's wailings, I marched out to the car, carrying the little dog wrapped in a blanket. The entire staff was roused, and maids rushed in and out, bringing his daybed, his nightbed, favorite cushions, toys and rubber rings, breakfast bowl, lunch bowl, supper bowl. Realizing that my car would never hold all the stuff, I started to drive away. As I moved off, Mrs. Pumphrey, with a despairing cry, threw an armful of the little coats through the window. I looked in the mirror before I turned the corner of the drive. Everybody was in tears. Out on the road, I glanced down at the pathetic little animal gasping on the seat by my side. I patted the head, and Tricky made a brave effort to wag his tail. "Poor old lad," I said. "You haven't a kick in you, but I think I know a cure for you." At the surgery, the household dogs surged round me. Tricky looked down at the noisy pack with dull eyes and, when put down, lay motionless on the carpet. The other dogs, after sniffing round him for a few seconds, decided he was an uninteresting object and ignored him. I made up a bed for him in the warm, loose box next to the one where the other dogs slept. For 2 days, I kept an eye on him, giving him no food but plenty of water. At the end of the second day, he started to show some interest in his surroundings, and on the third, he began to whimper when he heard the dogs in the yard. When I opened the door, Tricky trotted out and was immediately engulfed by Joe, the greyhound, and his friends. After rolling him over and thoroughly inspecting him, the dogs moved off down the garden. Tricky followed them, rolling slightly with his surplus fat. Later that day, I was present at feeding time. I watched while Tristan slopped the food into the bowls. There was the usual headlong rush, followed by the sounds of high-speed eating. Every dog knew that if he fell behind the others, he was liable to have some competition for the last part of his meal. When they had finished, Tricky took a walk round the shining bowls, licking casually inside one or two of them. Next day, an extra bowl was put out for him, and I was pleased to see him jostling his way towards it. From then on, his progress was rapid. He had no medicinal treatment of any kind, but all day he ran about with the dogs, joining in their friendly scrimmages. He discovered the joys of being bowled over, tramped on, and squashed every few minutes. He became an accepted member of the gang, an unlikely, silky little object among the shaggy crew, fighting like a tiger for his share at mealtimes and hunting rats in the old hen house at night. He had never had such a time in his life. All the while, Mrs. Pumphrey hovered anxiously in the background, ringing a dozen times a day for the latest bulletins. I dodged the questions about whether his cushions were being turned regularly or his correct coat worn according to the weather, but I was able to tell her that the little fellow was out of danger and convalescing rapidly. The word convalescing seemed to do something to Mrs. Pumphrey. She started to bring round fresh eggs, 24 at a time, to build up Tricky's strength. For a happy period, my partners and I had 2 eggs each for breakfast. But when the bottles of wine began to arrive, the real possibilities of the situation began to dawn on the household. It was to enrich Tricky's blood. Lunch became a ceremonial occasion with 2 glasses of wine before and several during.
Okay. So have you read the chapter till here, everyone?
Yeah, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay. Now I will go further with the chapter, and then we will move to the summary part, and then I will give you the meanings. Okay, and then we will discuss. When we will do the summary, you will understand the chapter. Okay, don't worry. अगर आपको अभी understand नहीं हुआ है, तो when we will do the summary, that time you will understand the chapter. अभी आप वो जैसे read कर रहे हैं, उसी प्रकार से chapter read करते जाओ. Look in your textbook also, and look at the picture also. That is there in your screen. Okay, this is a good way in which I can teach you reader. Okay, what is the time? Okay, I will complete the chapter in just half an hour. Like that the chapter is. Okay, I hope this is done. Now I will go to the next video. If you are able to hear me, I will just.
We could hardly believe it when the brandy came to put a final edge on Tricky's constitution. For a few nights, the fine spirit was rolled around, inhaled, and reverently drunk. They were days of deep content. Starting well with the extra egg in the morning, improved and sustained by the midday wine, and finishing luxuriously round the fire with the brandy. It was a temptation to keep Tricky on as a permanent guest, but I knew Mrs. Pumphrey was suffering, and after a fortnight felt compelled to phone and tell her that the little dog had recovered and was awaiting collection. Within minutes, about 30 feet of gleaming black metal drew up outside the surgery. The chauffeur opened the door, and I could just make out the figure of Mrs. Pumphrey, almost lost in the interior. Her hands were tightly clasped in front of her. Her lips trembled. "Oh, Mr. Harriet, do tell me the truth. Is he really better?" "Yes, he's fine. There's no need for you to get out of the car. I'll go and fetch him." I walked through the house into the garden. A mass of dogs was hurtling round and round the lawn, and in their midst, ears flapping, tail waving, was the little golden figure of Tricky. In 2 weeks, he had been transformed into a lithe, hard-muscled animal. He was keeping up well with the pack, stretching out in great bounds, his chest almost brushing the ground. I carried him back along the passage to the front of the house. The chauffeur was still holding the car door open, and when Tricky saw his mistress, he took off from my arms in a tremendous leap and sailed into Mrs. Pumphrey's lap. She gave a startled "Oh!" and then had to defend herself as he swarmed over her, licking her face and barking. During the excitement, I helped the chauffeur to bring out the beds, toys, cushions, coats and bowls, none of which had been used. As the car moved away, Mrs. Pumphrey leaned out of the window. Tears shone in her eyes. Her lips trembled. "Oh, Mr. Harriet," she cried, "how can I ever thank you? This is a triumph of surgery."
Okay. So the lesson is over like with this. Now I will move to the this where summary. Okay. Yes, what happened, Priyesh Dubey? You have raised your hand. Yes, what happened?
What, ma'am?
Any doubts? Priyesh.
No, ma'am.
Priyesh Dubey, you have raised your hand. What happened? Okay. 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 Now, can anyone tell me what basic you have understood from this story? Anyone? Basically, आपको
Yes,
क्या
ma'am.
समझ
May
में
I?
आया है? Yes.
Yeah, ma'am.
Me also, ma'am.
Okay. Wait. Raise your hands. Raise your hands. इसको अरे बाप रे इतनी है क्या? I will tell ऋत्विक कुमार. ऋत्विक.
मैम हिंदी में कि इंग्लिश में? मैम आई टेल
English हिंदी के
हिंदी इन इंग्लिश.
both you do same. चलो.
मैम इसमें एक मिस्टर पुम्फे रहती हैं, ठीक है ना. उनका एक डॉग रहता है, ठीक है, जो उसको बहुत खिलाती पिलाती हैं रोज सुबह शाम. खिलाती पिलाती हैं ब्रेड केक्स चॉकलेट्स एक्सेट्रा, ठीक है. तो वो इतना मोटा ताजा हो जाता है कि उसको ज्यादा बीमारी हो जाता है. कोई बॉडी से एक्सरसाइज नहीं होता है, उससे कराती नहीं है, जिससे उसका बॉडी अनकंफर्टेबल फील करता है, ठीक है. जिससे वो एक डॉक्टर का नाम आई कैन मिस
Harriot.
Mr. Harry.
Mr. Harriot.
हाँ वही ले जाते हैं उसको अपने एक क्या डॉग का हाउस होता है, डॉग हाउस. उसमें उसको बहुत कम खाना देते हैं, ज्यादा करके पानी देते हैं, और जो वेजिटेबल टाइप्स का होता है वो सब, ठीक है. और उसको बहुत सारा एक्सरसाइज कराते हैं, रनिंग कराते हैं ग्राउंड में. और उसके और झगड़ा मैंने फूड के लिए झगड़ा भी कराते हैं, क्योंकि वो हेल्दी रहे, जिससे उसे लगे कि हाँ किस फूड के लिए वो फाइट कर सके किसी के लिए,
Yes.
जिससे वो ठीक हो जाता है. और जो मिस्टर पोम्फे होती हैं वो आकर उसको ले जाती हैं.
Very good. Nice. Anyone else who can tell me once
Yes,
again
ma'am.
this?
Ma'am,
Wait,
may I
Yes,
have?
ma'am.
I want a gun. 1 minute.
Ma'am, me.
Okay. Navya answer.
यस मैम. ये इस चैप्टर में जनरली है कि एक बहुत ही रिच लेडी रहती है मिसेस पम्फ्री. वो उसके पास एक डॉग रहता है और वो अपने डॉग को एक्स्ट्रा चीज खिलाते रहती है हमेशा. मतलब ऑयली चीज, मतलब खाने से ज्यादा उसे जितना उससे भूख ना हो उससे ज्यादा वो खाना देती है. और फिर कोई एक्सरसाइज नहीं होता, जिसके कारण से उसके बाद वो बहुत मोटा हो जाता है एंड फिर वो चल फिर नहीं सकता ठीक से और दौड़ वोड़ नहीं सकता था. इसकी वजह से कुछ दिनों के बाद वो खाना पीना सब बंद कर देता है, जिसकी वजह से मिसेस पम्फ्री बहुत ज्यादा सैड रहती है कि मेरे डॉगी को क्या हो गया. फिर वो जब ये चैप्टर के राइटर जो है
Harriet.
Mr. Harriot.
हाँ, जेम्स हैरियट जब आते हैं तो वो उसको लेके जाते हैं अपने घर पे कि मुझे इसका सर्जरी करना है, अब मुझे अपने डॉग हाउस में से रखना होगा. बट वहाँ पे ले जाके उसे एज नॉर्मल कुछ दिनों के लिए दो दिनों के लिए खाना नहीं देते, सिर्फ पानी देते हैं. उसके बाद फिर थोड़ा बहुत खाना देते हैं, वो भी सबके साथ में, जैसे कि वो उसके बॉडी में वो दौड़े और फिर उसके वजह से उसका फैट जो होता है वो धीरे धीरे वो कम हो जाता है और वो हेल्दी हो जाता है, मीन्स पहले एक्टिव हो जाता है. फिर जब उसको मिसेस पम्फ्री देखती है तो वो बोलती है कि ये तो सही में एक सर्जरी है.
Okay.
हो गया
Any
मैम.
student has left the class or what? Any student has left the class? Yes, Harsh Pratap has left the class. Okay. Good. Now I will show you the summary of the lesson. Let's read the summary of the lesson and उसके बाद मैं आपको minis देती हूँ. I'm not getting the option to. Essence. Okay. Now I will read. Behind me, you also read essence. Okay. Now basically, this author who is there, James Herriot. He grew up in Scotland and he is also a veteran
मैम
surgeon. Yes.
मैम मैम प्लीज मैम
बोलो.
स्लाइड शो मैम स्लाइड शो में कर दीजिए तो वो मैम हम लोग मैम पढ़ते भी रहेंगे मैम ऐसे दिख भी नहीं रहा थोड़ा बहुत थोड़ा सा
Want it big or what? यहाँ पर big नहीं हो रहा है ना. Wait wait. I will try to open it in the new page. Okay, I hope you can see it now.
Yes, ma'am.
यस मैम
So James Herriot is the author and he's also a veteran surgeon if you see. Okay. Let's see the summary. A triumph of surgery can be regarded as a part of James Herriot's memorials, where he recollects the memory of his triumph of curing a dog named Triggy successfully while he was practicing veterinary profession. So it is a memory of the writer. Okay, when he was doing his veterinary profession, when he was practicing. Okay. Now, the story begins when we are told that a rich woman named Mrs. Pumphrey, along with her dog Tricky, meets the narrator, Mr. Herriot, in a street. No sooner does the lady meet the narrator than she starts complaining about a pet dog's poor health to him, whom we discover in due to course of time was veterinary surgeon. So she tells about her dog that my dog is going weak, my dog's health is very poor, he tells to the narrator. The narrator is shocked to see Tricky in such an unusual shape. The dog had become so fat that it had been compared to a bloated sausage. Okay, bloated sausage मतलब बहुत ऐसा जो filled sausage वो होता है ना बड़ा वो. In the story, his bloodshot eyes and dropping tongue gave an indication about his poor health. ओके तो उसकी जो टंग आप देख सकते हैं यहाँ पर कैसे वो मुंह से बाहर निकल रही है इन द इमेज. So like that, so you can see how his health was so poor health. However, it seemed that the dog's mistress failed to recognize the dog's actual problem. Since Mrs. Pumphrey finds that Tricky had become listless and devoid of energy, she came to the conclusion that Tricky must be suffering from nutrition. Okay, she therefore began to give Tricky some extra food between the meals with the hope that to build him up. We also learned that she gave him some malt, cod liver oil and a bowl of Horlicks at night. Okay, तो मिस्ट्रेस को क्या
मैम
लगा कि he is growing weak. Yes,
मैम
बोलो.
कॉड लिवर ऑयल मतलब क्या होता है
Cod liver oil is like
मैम मैं बोलूं?
हाँ.
कॉड लिवर ऑयल मींस फिश ऑयल टाइप से होता है, जैसे कि किसी किसी मतलब एक्स्ट्रा फैट हो जाता है लीवर के पास, उसी से जो ऑयल बनता है उसी को कॉड लिवर ऑयल बोला जाता है. वो बहुत ज्यादा फैटी होता है.
ओके, ये एक फिश का नाम है कॉड फिश. तो उसका जो ऑयल होता है ना वो लीवर का ऑयल. ओके, इसको कॉड फिश का जो ऑयल होता है इसको बोलते हैं कॉड लिवर ऑयल. ओके, तो शी थॉट दैट उसको माल न्यूट्रिशन हुआ है, मतलब उसकी न्यूट्रिशन की कमी है, इसलिए वो उसको हॉर्लिक्स दे देती थी, कॉड लिवर ऑयल दे देती थी मील्स में एट नाइट. ओके, टू बिल्ड हिम अप. So fond of Tricky, Mrs. Pamphily was that she failed to refuse him cream cakes and chocolates in spite of the narrator's warnings, which added to the problem. नरेटर ने कहा था कि उसको क्रीम केक्स नहीं देने हैं, चॉकलेट्स नहीं देने हैं, तो भी जो मिसेस पैम्फेरी थी उसने ट्रिकी को ये सब दिया, in spite telling. Okay, worsening the problem further, we learn Mrs. Pumphrey did not even allow her dog to go for exercise regularly. इतना खा के he didn't also allow his dog to go for exercise. With so much of pampering done by his mistress, the dog was sure to fall ill someday, which soon happened. One day, Trekkie had bouts of vomiting and refused to eat anything. He spent all his time lying on the rug painting. So he was just sitting, he had vomiting. Okay, क्यों हुआ ये सब? क्योंकि उसकी जो मिस्ट्रेस थी वो उसको इतना पैम्पर करती थी, तो इतना खा पीने को दे देती थी कि एक बार उसको ये सब ज्यादा हो गया और वो इल हो गया इसकी वजह से. Soon Mrs. Pumphrey summoned Mr. Heriot, and in spite of Mr. Pumphrey's wailing, the narrator carried the dog with him, saying that the dog required keen observation. This he felt could be done in surgery only. अब देखो, तो ये सब होने के बाद ना this Mr. Pumphrey, Mrs. Pumphrey felt very cautious about the dog. उसको बहुत like ना क्या हुआ आप बोल सकते हैं कि उसको बहुत परेशानी हुई कि अभी क्या करना है. She was not understanding, so she called Mr. Heriot. Okay, और Mr. Heriot ने उसको अपने कहाँ पर गया, अपने साथ कैरी कर लिया उस डॉग को. ओके, उसने कहा कि उसको अच्छी शार्प ऑब्जर्वेशन में रखना होगा इसलिए. ओके, सो दिस ही फेल्ट कुड बी डन इन द सर्जरी ओनली. सर्जरी मतलब क्या? इट इज ओके, since Mrs. Pumphrey was a lonely lady who had directed all her attention to the love and care of Tricky, his absence could not be tolerated by her. She tried her best to provide Tricky with all sorts of comfort to which he was habitual. She therefore tried to send Tricky's day bed, night bed, favorite cushions, toys, rubber, rings and separate balls for different meals to the surgery. मुझे लगता है ये समरी अगर आप रीड करेंगे तो आपको बहुत समझ में आता है चैप्टर, राइट? या मैं समरी भी आपको समझाऊं?
नो मैम,
क्या कहा?
रीड करके समझ.
No, ma'am.
I'm reading the summary. You also read the summary. Okay, so उसने क्या किया? Okay. Not only that, but fresh round eggs, wine, and brandy too were sent to the surgery by Mrs. Pumphrey to ensure that Tricky did not feel like a square peg in a round house in the surgery. Okay. मीन्स उसको क्या लगा कि सिर्फ वो यहाँ पर खाली बैठा रहेगा, कुछ खाएगा नहीं पिएगा नहीं, ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए. सो इसलिए उसने उसके पास जो भी टॉयज थी, जो भी उसके पास कुशन्स थी, कोट्स थी, वो सब वहां पर भेज दी. नाइट बेड, डे बेड, सब कुछ भेज दी.
और ये सब डॉक्टर खा जाता था.
हाँ, the narrator knew Tricky's actual problem from the very beginning. He therefore tried to cure Tricky using his own way. The food items sent by for Tricky by Mrs. Pumphrey were therefore consumed by the narrator himself, who ate them with relish. तो जो Mrs. Pumphrey Tricky के लिए भेजते थे वो narrator खुद खा जाता था, कंज्यूम कर लेता था. Okay. The narrator knew that a life without pampering could cure Tricky. The narrator gave Tricky no food but only water for the first 2 days. While Tricky was provided food easily at Mr. Pumphrey's place, here in the surgery, Tricky had to rush in order to procure his food when it began to be served, lest he lost it to some other dogs. तो उसको फूड लेने के लिए क्या करना पड़ता था? दौड़ना पड़ता था. ओके, ऐसे आप देख सकते हैं यहाँ पर सब डॉग्स क्या हो रहे हैं? दौड़ रहे हैं. In the image you can see. In the surgery, Tricky discovered the joy of being billowed over, trampled on and squashed by other dogs which he was not used to experiencing at Mrs. Pumphrey's place. Such regular exercises improved Tricky's health. In no time, Tricky got transformed from a bloated sausage to a hard muscle and bone. Soon, Mrs. Pumphrey was informed about Tricky's health, who couldn't prevent herself from meeting Tricky any further and decided to come to the surgery. Surgery is a place over here where the dogs are kept, okay, where these dogs are kept, like a hospital, you can see. The immense joy which Mr. Pamphlet experiences seeing Trekie's recovery is best understood when the dog jumps from Mr. Heriot's arms and sits in her lap. Mrs. Pamphlet then remarks, "This is a triumph of surgery," which once again highlights her unconditional love for her pet. Okay, let us see the theme. Mrs. Pumphrey's inclusions. Okay, see. Mrs. Pumphrey has been shown as an extremely rich lady who, being alone, had nothing better to do than to devote her time to the care of her pet dog. Okay, tracking her foolishly indulgent ways of treating her dog resulted in his illness. For she didn't allow him to do anything exercise and instead keeping feeding him as much as he could. Looking at the actions, it's advisable not to be so lenient, but to be stringent. For it seems nothing yields to good results if there is no strictness in life. In fact, discipline is required in all walks of life to reach great heights of achievement. Okay, ये सब मैं अभी यहाँ पर नहीं करने वाली आपके साथ. I hope you have understood the chapter 1.
Yeah, ma'am.
ये सेंड कर दीजिएगा.
ओके, 1 मिनट. क्या हुआ?
मैम ये सेंड कर दीजिएगा.
मैंने ना आपको ग्रुप पे एक पीपीटी सेंड की है.
Yes,
अभी
यस मैम.
Okay, this is not that PPT because this PPT is not shareable. I can't share this PPT with you. I am
मैम
not
वो
allowed.
मिस्टर पंपरी के बारे में जो था वो आप एक बार पीछे कर लीजिए, हम स्क्रीनशॉट ले लेते हैं.
Wait. Okay, you want that? Yes, take this.
यस मैम, डन. नेक्स्ट वन.
And yes. Okay. Abhi, take down the meanings that I am giving you. Come to page number 1.
यस मैम.
Okay. Malt. First word is malt, which is on line number. Wait, I will tell you from the line. Yes. Count from up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9th line on page number 1.
मैम माल न्यूट्रिशन.
Malt, M-A-L-T. M-A-L-T. मिल गया आपको माल्ट?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
मैंने
ma'am.
थोड़ी
Malt
बहुत
and cod
नोट
liver.
कर लिए मैम.
क्या? हाँ.
मैंने थोड़ी बहुत वो स्क्रीनशॉट कर लिए फोटोज.
Okay, very good. Okay, 1 minute. I will just show you where that
Yes,
is.
ma'am. मिल गया malnutrition. Suffering from
हाँ.
वो
malnutrition.
नहीं है.
Not
Malt and
Ma'am, वही है.
cod liver oil, ma'am.
Just wait, students, wait. I will
Okay,
show you
ma'am.
what it is. Where it is and what it is, I will just show you. Just give me some time. Just 35. I will underline with the PDF. 1 minute.
Ma'am, cod liver oil के पहले ही है, ma'am, just.
हाँ. Cod liver oil के पहले ही.
कॉड लिवर ऑयल कहाँ पे?
मैम
हॉर्लिक्स वाला नहीं है लास्ट जो फर्स्ट पर आएगा आपका.
मैम मेरा बैटरी चार्ज नहीं है. आई वांट टू लेफ्ट नाउ.
Okay, leave. Okay.
हाँ,
देखो
sir.
यहाँ पर 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Malt. The meaning of malt is a grain. It is
Yes,
a grain.
ma'am.
Okay. उसके बाद है cod liver oil. Cod
Ma'am,
liver
what have
oil
you
is
said? Meaning of malt?
और grain pulse grain GRAIN grain.
मैंने ग्रेट सुन लिया था इसलिए पूछी।
ओके उसके बाद cod liver oil. It is a oil of the cod fish liver. ओके उसके बाद bowl is a container. ओके relent where is the word relent here? Relent का मतलब होता है to agree upon something after refusing. To agree upon something after refusing. ओके मैं इसके मीनिंग्स आपको एक वर्ड फाइल में सेंड कर देती हूँ अभी आई विल सेंड यू जस्ट वेट
मैम
आई विल
Okay,
सेंड
ma'am.
द फिलॉसफी
Just
मैम
on
let
WhatsApp.
me
Thank you,
that
ma'am.
one.
Now let us
मैम
go to
व्हाट
the
इज द
next
मीनिंग ऑफ
chapter.
excuse me
हाँ
मैम
हाँ
मैम व्हाट इज द मीनिंग ऑफ रियोमी
रियो में मतलब देखो वेयर इज इट रियो में
मैम इन सेकंड लाइन
हाँ
मैम
हाँ
यस मैम
हाँ
या
रियो में मतलब उसकी आंखों से ना पानी निकल रहा है रियोमी मतलब देखो रियोमी का मीनिंग क्या होता है ना कि लाइक ना ही इज जस्ट व्हाट आई कैन से और उसकी नाक और आई से ऐसे वाटर निकल रहा था जब आपको चश्मा लगता है ना तब आपकी आंखों से कैसे पानी निकलता है वैसे ही वाटर
ओके
इज
मैम
डिस्चार्ज जब आपको सर्दी होती है या आपको चश्मा लगता है तब आपकी आंखों से और नाक से क्या कैसे पानी निकलता है वैसा जब आपको फीवर होता है तब लाइक दैट इज रियोमी ओके चलो आई विल मूव टू द नेक्स्ट chapter now that is thief chapter 1 2 3 4 5 6 why so less students
Ma'am, chapter second.
that's what a thief story
Ma'am, question
उसके लिए
answer of this chapter.
I will send on WhatsApp पहले हम इसे
मैम
कंप्लीट कर लेते हैं इससे हम
मैम
पहले कंप्लीट कर लेते हैं यस
मैम प्लीज मैम डू चैप्टर सेकंड डू इन टुमारो मैम नॉट टुडे यू डू
बेसिकली 2 days में लास्ट लेक्चर माय डियर मैं कल से लीव पर
ओके मैम कैरी ऑन
if you want you can take 2 minutes break and then I will start
नो मैम गोइंग ऑन कंटिन्यू
Okay,
मैम
ma'am.
मैम
okay just 2 minutes break 8:40 I will start
मैम आपने
Ma'am,
फेडरलिज्म
41 is 39.
Okay. Yeah, I am getting it as 8:38. So for that case.
मैम आपने फेडरलिज्म कंप्लीट करा दिया
नहीं. Federalism one part is there still. तब तक मैं आपको ग्लॉसरी सेंड करती हूँ ग्रुप पे सो जिसने नहीं लिया है वो कर लो I have completed Mrinal I have completed with the first chapter of the reader I am going to the second chapter now okay. I will just send you on WhatsApp both the groups I will send new group also and old group also
मैम एक चीज नहीं
yes
समझ आई मैम
हाँ
मैम हम लोग का एंट्रेंस एग्जाम नहीं होगा क्या
आपका एंट्रेंस एग्जाम होगा बट डेट हैज चेंज्ड कुछ तो चेंज किया है उन्होंने इसलिए जस्ट वेट
मैम टोटल हाउ मेनी स्टूडेंट इन न्यू ग्रुप
न्यू ग्रुप पे ऑलमोस्ट 12 स्टूडेंट्स है ऑलमोस्ट देखिए मुझे पता नहीं अभी कितने हैं
हमारे
यस
पूरी क्लास में स्टूडेंट होंगे
क्या
पूरे क्लास में टोटल मिलके
just wait 1 minute I am just in a work 1 minute I will just send this meanings to you and then I will speak okay I have sent the meanings some meanings are doubly said. Na? Some meanings are double said. Just wait, let me see which meanings are double said. Two meanings are double said. Yes, done. New group.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Got it.
Chapter 1. Okay, let's start with the second chapter. A thief's story written by Ruskin Bond. अभी देखो. It is a Ruskin Bond story, so it will be very interesting story.
Yes, ma'am.
You have 15 minutes, so I don't think so you can complete this chapter. I will try to complete.
मैम एक्स्ट्रा टाइम लेके कंप्लीट कर दीजिए।
क्या?
तो कोई किसी की कोई क्लास नहीं होगी आफ्टर एक्स्ट्रा टाइम लेके ये चैप्टर कंप्लीट कर दीजिए।
एक्स्ट्रा क्लास में अटेंडेंस शुड आल्सो बी देयर में इतने कम स्टूडेंट ज्वाइन होते हैं ना रियली, तो एक्स्ट्रा क्लास लेने का मन नहीं होता।
मैम 80 स्टूडेंट हैं। मैम आज कर दीजिए बस।
Okay, I will do half of the chapter if we complete it now. इसका रीडिंग तो हम कंप्लीट कर लेंगे अभी। If explanation is there, I will do. Let me just.
मैम आफ्टर टुमारो मैम आप कहाँ पे चले जाओगे मैम? आप लीव
I'm
बोल
gonna
रहे थे।
leave. I have my training, so I need to go for that training.
ओके
मैम आप तो बोले थे जुलाई से।
हाँ, but that training dates have been launched now, no? So date नहीं launch हुई थी ना? It's just a 10 minutes playback. So.
Ma'am, 2 minutes.
The Thief's Story by Ruskin Bond. I was still a thief when I met Anil. And though only 15, I was an experienced and fairly successful hand. Anil was watching a wrestling match when I approached him. He was about 25, a tall, lean fellow. And he looked easygoing, kind, and simple enough for my purpose. I hadn't had much luck of late and thought I might be able to get into the young man's confidence. "You look a bit of a wrestler yourself," I said. A little flattery helps in making friends. "So do you," he replied, which put me off for a moment, because at that time I was rather thin. "Well," I said modestly, "I do wrestle a bit." "What's your name?" "Hari Singh," I lied. I took a new name every month. That kept me ahead of the police and my former employers. After this introduction, Anil talked about the well-oiled wrestlers who were grunting, lifting, and throwing each other about. I didn't have much to say. Anil walked away. I followed casually. "Hello again," he said. I gave him my most appealing smile. "I want to work for you," I said. "But I can't pay you." I thought that over for a minute. Perhaps I had misjudged my man. I asked, "Can you feed me? Can you cook?" "I can cook," I lied again. "If you can cook, then maybe I can feed you." He took me to his room over the Jumna sweet shop and told me I could sleep on the balcony. But the meal I cooked that night must have been terrible, because Anil gave it to a stray dog and told me to be off. But I just hung around, smiling in my most appealing way, and he couldn't help laughing. Later, he patted me on the head and said, "Never mind. He'd teach me to cook." He also taught me to write my name and said he would soon teach me to write whole sentences and to add numbers. I was grateful. I knew that once I could write like an educated man, there would be no limit to what I could achieve. It was quite pleasant working for Anil. I made the tea in the morning and then would take my time buying the day's supplies, usually making a profit of about ₹1 a day. I think he knew I made a little money this way, but he did not seem to mind. Anil made money by fits and starts. He would borrow one week, lend the next. He kept worrying about his next check, but as soon as it arrived, he would go out and celebrate. It seems he wrote for magazines, a queer way to make a living. One evening he came home with a small bundle of notes saying he had just sold a book to a publisher. At night, I saw him tuck the money under the mattress. I had been working for Anil for almost a month and, apart from cheating on the shopping, had not done anything in my line of work. I had every opportunity for doing so. Anil had given me a key to the door, and I could come and go as I pleased. He was the most trusting person I had ever met, and that is why it was so difficult to rob him. It's easy to rob a greedy man because he can afford to be robbed, but it's difficult to rob a careless man. Sometimes he doesn't even notice he's been robbed, and that takes all the pleasure out of the work. Well, it's time I did some real work, I told myself. I'm out of practice, and if I don't take the money, he'll only waste it on his friends. After all, he doesn't even pay me. Anil was asleep. A beam of moonlight stepped over the balcony and fell on the bed. I sat up on the floor, considering the situation. If I took the money, I could catch the 10:30 express to Lucknow. Slipping out of the blanket, I crept up to the bed. Anil was sleeping peacefully. His face was clear and unlined. Even I had more marks on my face, though mine were mostly scars. My hands slid under the mattress, searching for the notes. When I found them, I drew them out without a sound. Anil sighed in his sleep and turned on his side towards me. I was startled and quickly crawled out of the room. When I was on the road, I began to run. I had the notes at my waist, held there by the string of my pajamas. I slowed down to a walk and counted the notes. 600 rupees in 50s. I could live like an oil-rich Arab for a week or two. When I reached the station, I did not stop at the ticket office. I had never bought a ticket in my life, but dashed straight to the platform. The Lucknow Express was just moving out. The train had still to pick up speed, and I should have been able to jump into one of the carriages. But I hesitated. For some reason, I can't explain. And I lost the chance to get away. When the train had gone, I found myself standing alone on the deserted platform. I had no idea where to spend the night. I had no friends, believing that friends were more trouble than help, and I did not want to make anyone curious by staying at one of the small hotels near the station. The only person I knew really well was the man I had robbed. Leaving the station, I walked slowly through the bazaar. In my short career as a thief, I had made a study of men's faces when they had lost their goods. The greedy man showed fear. The rich man showed anger. The poor man showed acceptance. But I knew that Anil's face, when he discovered the theft, would show only a touch of sadness. Not for the loss of money, but for the loss of trust. I found myself in the Maidan and sat down on a bench. The night was chilly. It was early November, and a light drizzle added to my discomfort. Soon, It was raining quite heavily. My shirt and pajamas stuck to my skin, and a cold wind blew the rain across my face. I went back to the bazaar and sat down in the shelter of the clock tower. The clock showed midnight. I felt for the notes. They were damp from the rain. Anil's money. In the morning, he would probably have given me 2 or 3 rupees to go to the cinema. But now, I had it all. I couldn't cook his meals, run to the bazaar, or learn to write whole sentences anymore. I had forgotten about them in the excitement of the theft. Whole sentences, I knew, could one day bring me more than a few 100 rupees. It was a simple matter to steal, and sometimes just as simple to be caught. But to be a really big man, a clever and respected man, was something else. I should go back to Anil, I told myself, if only to learn to read and write. I hurried back to the room, feeling very nervous, for it is much easier to steal something than to return it undetected. I opened the door quietly and stood in the doorway in clouded moonlight. Anil was still asleep. I crept to the head of the bed, and my hand came up with the notes. I felt his breath on my hand. I remained still for a minute. Then my hand found the edge of the mattress and slipped under it with the notes. I awoke late next morning to find that Anil had already made the tea. He stretched out his hand towards me. There was a 50-rupee note between his fingers. My heart sank. I thought I had been discovered. I made some money yesterday, he explained. Now you'll be paid regularly. My spirits rose. But when I took the note, I saw it was still wet from the night's rain. Today, we'll start writing sentences, he said. He knew, but neither his lips nor his eyes showed anything. I smiled at Anil in my most appealing way, and the smile came by itself, without any effort.
Okay. So this was a chapter. It's a very small chapter. Again, I will ask the same question. What did you understand? Basic idea. What was the basic idea?
मैम एक्चुअली इस मैम जो चोर होता है मैम इसमें बेसिक आइडिया ये है कि मैम कि हमेशा चोरी के साथ साथ एक्चुअली मैम आई एम टोटली कंफ्यूज मैम लेट मी अ मिनट
Okay. Yes, Uday Malhotra.
मैम इसमें ये है, इस स्टोरी में ये है कि वो हरी सिंह कैसे अनिल का रुपीस चोरी करता है और उससे झूठ बोलता है कि वो मेरे पास रुपए नहीं है.
Okay. And
मैम इट इज़ नॉट इजी टू रॉब और एनी टाइम. मैम कभी भी किसी को रॉब करना बहुत आसान नहीं होता मैम. इन चैप्टर में मैम कि वो चोरी कर सकता था मगर मैम वो चोरी नहीं किया क्योंकि उसका जो अनिल का जो ट्रस्ट है मैम वो उसका लॉस्ट हो जाएगा. इसके कारण मैम उसे अंदर से फील नहीं आ रहा था मैम कि मैं रॉब क्यों करूँ मैम बिकॉज द हरी सिंह वाज वांटेड टू कीप मैम उसे मतलब डराना चाहता था मैम. जो भी एक्सप्रेशन होता था उसे अच्छा लगता था मैम. जब चोरी होने के बाद किसी को पता चलता था कि उसका पैसा चोरी हो चुका था उसका रिएक्शन उसको अच्छा लगता था. लेकिन जो अनिल था उसको कोई गम ही नहीं था मैम कि उसका पैसा अगर चोरी भी हो गया तो उसे कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. बस उसको वो दिक्कत होता है मैम कि उसका जो ट्रस्ट था वो टूट गया था अबाउट हरी सिंह.
okay, let's see the summary now. What does the summary has to say? Let's see. After the summary, I will be discussing the questions of this, thinking about it very shortly. I will discuss, and then I will end the lecture because it's already 5 minutes only there. I will just discuss the lecture. the questions and the summary.
Ma'am, please start the very short questions.
1 minute. Let me first play this no. Okay. The Thief's story written by Ruskin Bond. Okay. Who is the writer? Is Anil the writer or Hari Singh writer? Who is the writer?
Ma'am, Hari Singh, ma'am. Ma'am, Hari Singh is the writer in this
Why?
in this
Why?
story.
Why do
Ma'am,
you
क्योंकि
think Hari
वो
Singh is the writer?
Ruskin Bond. Ma'am, Ruskin Bond.
Ma'am, Ruskin Bond.
See, smart children, very smart children.
Ma'am, Hari Singh.
100 out of 100.
सॉरी
Very
मैम,
good.
रस्किन बॉन्ड, यस मैम, रस्किन बॉन्ड। मैम मैं देखा नहीं था मैम, सॉरी मैम।
अरे मैंने your answer was correct, my dear. It is Hari Singh only. I asked who is the writer. Hari Singh. Sorry, Hari Singh. Okay.
Ma'am, Ruskin Bond है ma'am writer, ना कि
अरे
ma'am Hari Singh.
अरे 1 minute.
Wait.
राइटर इज रस्किन बॉन्ड, पर इस स्टोरी में राइटर कौन है? इस स्टोरी में स्टोरी नरेट कौन कर रहा है?
नरेटर है ना?
It is
वो बोला जा रहा है।
Hari Singh who is narrating the story. Okay, चलो, let us start with the summary. The
Hari
thief
Singh.
story.
अब समझ आया ma'am.
The thief story is based on the recollection of a thief and is written in first person. The story highlights the moral dilemma of a thief as well as his potentiality for goodness. The story begins when we are told that although the narrator was only 15, yet he was quite an accomplished and experienced hand in his profession of theft when he met Anil for the first time during a wrestling match. No sooner had the narrator met Anil than he flaunted a prospective client with him. The narrator had an irresistible desire to rob Anil. In order to shape his plan, he introduced himself to Anil by a pseudonym Hari. Pseudonym means what? A false name. Okay? And expressed his desire to work for him. Anil refused to engage Hari as a domestic help initially. He told Hari that since he made money by fits and starts, he could not pay Hari regularly. However, later Anil agreed to keep Hari with him on condition that Hari could cook food for him. In return, Anil promised that he would give Hari food to eat. It seems that although Hari knew nothing about cooking, yet he accepted the job not only to get an entry in Anil's house. However, soon the truth came out. It was discovered that Hari was safer as a cook, and the food cooked by him turned out to be a disaster. Means Hari was not a good cook. Therefore, Anil had to give it to a stray dog. Okay, जो गली का कुत्ता होता है ना, that is a stray dog. Okay. Anil was a kind and a generous fellow. He told Hari that he would teach him to cook food. Not only that, Anil also promised him to teach, read and write and to add numbers. Anil showed full faith in Hari and made him buy his daily supplies. Hari was an opportunist who knew how to make good profit out of it daily. Although Anil had some hint about his theft, he preferred to ignore it. Instead, he completely relied on Hari and gave him the keys of his room too. देखो कितना trust था उसको. Okay. Although Hari had various chances of robbing Anil, he confesses that it was quite difficult for him to rob Anil. Since Anil was very careless and relying, Hari was hesitant to break his trust. According to Hari, it was quite easy to rob a greedy man because he deserves it. On the contrary, it was quite difficult to rob a careless man because he won't ever care to notice if he had been robbed. In such a case, the theft's efforts would remain unnoticed and would not get any praise for his trickery. Okay. अगर कोई थेफ्ट जो होता है वो चोरी करता है, तो अगर जो केयरफुल रिस्पॉन्सिबल मैन होते हैं वो क्या करते हैं, मेरी चोरी हो गई, मेरा पैसा चोरी हो गया, वो ऐसे करेंगे। और जो केयरलेस है उसको पता ही नहीं चोरी हो गई क्या हो गया, वो कुछ नहीं करेगा, राइट। However, one day Hari felt if he won't rob Anil, he would be out of practice. He therefore decided to take a bundle of crisp notes which he had seen were kept under Anil's mattress when Anil had sold a book to a publisher. Okay. When Anil slept on the bed, obviously of everything, Hari stealthily took out the money from the mattress. Very quietly took out the money from the mattress. No sooner he robbed Anil of his money and then he left the house for the railway station. However, when he reached the platform, he found that the Lucknow Express had just departed, had just left. Okay. Though there were enough time to jump into the compartment, somehow Hari did not attempt to board the train. Soon he found himself standing alone on the deserted platform. Okay, इतना आपको समझ में आया है स्टूडेंट्स? मैंने जो भी रीड किया, जो आपने रीड किया यहाँ पर. Now the readers find a gradual change in the sight of the thief. Okay, the young boy realized that Anil was a good master and he never doubted his intentions. He therefore wondered how Anil would react when he would come to know about the theft. Hari went to Anil, would come to know about the theft. His face would show signs of sadness, not for the loss of money, but for the breach of trust. देखो कुछ लोग ऐसे होते हैं ना कि उनको जाने तो पैसा गया तो गया, पर मेरा ट्रस्ट भी उसने तोड़ दिया. ओके, मेरा ट्रस्ट जो था वो फेक था उसके ऊपर, मैंने उस पर इतना विश्वास रखा, उसने मेरा ट्रस्ट ब्रेक कर दिया. ओके, कुछ ऐसे लोग होते हैं जो पैसे के ऊपर ट्रस्ट को ज्यादा क्या बोलते हैं प्राधान्यता देते हैं. During this time, Hari also realized that if he would learn to read and write, it would definitely help him get true success in life. Hari was therefore repentant. Hari slowly entered the town, but then he realized that he had nowhere to go and he didn't know anyone except Anil. Soon the drizzle started, means small drops of rain. The crisp note stuck up in the trousers got wet. Ultimately, having a prick in his conscience, Hari came back to Anil's house and consciously slipped back the money under the mattress. He went to sleep with a hope that Anil would never come to know about the whole episode. Next morning, Anil got up early than Hari and handed him a cup of tea with a 50-rupee note. He promised Hari that hence onward Hari would be paid regularly. He also declared that soon he would teach Hari to write full sentences. Although aware of everything, Anil's countenance didn't display any emotion and he behaved absolutely normal. The ending of the story highlights that a hardened criminal can be transformed into a pious soul through love, compassion and kindness. See what a moral the story is giving us. ओके, एक हार्डेंड क्रिमिनल है, उसका जो बिहेवियर है, उसका जो स्वभाव है, वो कैसे ट्रांसफॉर्म किया थ्रू कंपैशन, लव एंड काइंडनेस. हाउ अ काइंड पर्सन, अ लविंग पर्सन कैन ट्रांसफॉर्म द सोल ऑफ एनी पर्सन. ओके, दैट वी कैन सी फ्रॉम दिस लेसन. समझ में आया सबको? पहले उसने उसके पैसे चोरी किए, उसको अच्छा नहीं लगा, जो थीफ था उसको अच्छा नहीं लगा. उसके बाद ही थॉट दैट मैंने उसका फेट क्या कर दिया है, ब्रेक कर दिया है. वो फिर से गया उसके घर, अनिल के घर, और जहाँ से उसने पैसे निकाले थे वहां से उससे अगेन उसने वो पैसे रख दिए. ओके, और नेक्स्ट डे अनिल गॉट अप वेरी अर्ली और उसने क्या कहा कि अभी तुम रोज पेड किए जाओगे, आपको रोज आपको सैलरी दी जाएगी आप जो काम करते हो इसके लिए. Okay, very interesting chapter.
Yeah, ma'am.
Understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Navya,
Yes, ma'am.
Abhishek, Madhusudan, Uday.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. समझ में आ गया मैम.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. अभी मैंने ग्रुप पे इसके मीनिंग्स भी सेंड किए हैं. अभी उसके क्वेश्चन आंसर्स मैं आपको बाद में सेंड करूंगी. कम टू पेज नंबर 6 एवरीवन. सॉरी फॉर द डिले, बट कम टू पेज नंबर 6.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, the first question. thinking about it, first question, what kind of person do you think the narrator or veterinary surgeon is? Would you say he is a tactful as well as full of common sense? Yes, what's the answer? Anyone? Please raise your hand.
Ma'am, which one?
Question 1, think about it.
May I?
Yes, who is this? May I? Please answer. May I?
Ma'am, me.
Okay, answer.
मैम, नरेटर क्वेश्चन बोल रहा है कि नरेटर सच में सर्जन थे क्या, वेटनरी सर्जन जो कि मीन्स एनिमल्स को वो सर्जरी करते हैं? तो इसका आंसर है नहीं, वो सर्जन नहीं थे, बट वो बस नॉर्मल मेथड से ही उसे ठीक कर दिए थे, बस उसे
He
खाना
was a
कम दिए
surgeon, my
एंड
dear, my dear, my dear. He was a surgeon. He was a veterinary surgeon. Okay. So जो narrator थे, so write, if you want to write, a narrator, a veterinary surgeon is a capable and wise doctor. Okay, he handles tricky properly, which shows that he is sincere about his profession. उन्होंने tricky को अच्छी तरह से handle किया. Okay, he
मैम
does not
क्या
operate
मैम
upon
वो
the
क्या
dog.
सर्जन डॉक्टर थे।
क्या?
मैम मैं क्या बोल सकता हूँ मैम?
हाँ हाँ,
मैम मैं बोलता हूँ मैम।
क्या?
मैम आंसर मैं दे दूँ मैम?
हाँ दे दो.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I think the narrator, a veterinary surgeon, is a very tactful person. He knows how to deal with people. He adjusts himself well to the circumstance. He is full of common sense. Also, he is immediately understands Tricky's problem. That's why मैम वो सब समझ गया मैम, इसलिए उसने सर्जरी नहीं किया मैम.
Yes, okay. Also, he does not operate upon the dog unnecessarily, or he cures him by altering his diet and activities. Okay, he is a tactful person as he knew exactly how to convince Mrs. Pomfrey to hospitalize Tricky for a surgery. His decision to inform Mrs. Pomfrey to collect Tricky supports his sensibilities, even though he was attempted to keep Tricky as a permanent guest. ओके, ये आंसर मैं आपको आफ्टरवर्ड्स शॉर्टन करके सेंड कर देती हूँ. डू यू थिंक ट्रेकी वाज हैप्पी टू गो होम? व्हाट डू यू थिंक विल हैपन नाउ?
No,
किसको
ma'am, he
पता है
was not
आंसर?
happy
ऋत्विक.
going to home. Ma'am, Tricky was not happy to go home.
ओके.
No, ma'am, he is happy, ma'am.
He's happy, yes, he's happy. So
Yes,
Tricky
ma'am.
was happy to go back home as he really loved his mistress and comfort of his lavish life. Okay, he didn't have any friends at home like in the hospital, but he seemed equally excited at the sight of Mrs. Pumphrey. I think that Mrs. Pumphrey will now be careful about Tricky's diet and health. So she may also give him exercise. So she may also give him exercise daily as prescribed by the veterinarian earlier. Okay. So usko exercise. That last part of the answer you can write in your own words. It's your choice. Okay. Question 3. Do you think this is a real life episode or mere fiction, or is it a mixture of both?
Ma'am, I think this is a mix of both, ma'am, real episode and fiction.
Yes. Why?
मैम
मैम,
क्योंकि
it can be real.
देखो, जब ऐसे टाइप के क्वेश्चन आते हैं आपको गिव रीजन भी करना होता है. हाँ बोलो. कौन बोल रहा था? बोलो अभी.
yes, ma'am.
Okay, I will only give fast the answer. So it is a mixture of both, because it may be possible to reach persons to overfeed their pets due to love. It is not usual for them to maintain a vast wardrobe for them either, but it is unlikely for a veterinary doctor to go out on the way and lie in order to save an animal. It is also 1 minute. It is also unusual for anyone to consume food which is given in the name of pet's health. ओके, मैं इसके आंसर्स आपको बाद में सेंड कर दूंगी. ओके, डोंट वरी, वी विल जस्ट
Okay,
डिस्कस नाउ.
ma'am.
Page number 13. Come on. First and second question.
मैम आज लग रहा है मैराथन क्लास चल रही है।
यस, बट आपको ये दोनों चैप्टर समझ में आए ना?
यस मैम।
नव्या, समझ में आया क्या?
यस मैम, बट थोड़ा थोड़ा कम।
ग्लॉसरी जब, हाँ, तो मैंने जो पीपीटी सेंड की उसको रेफर करो, एक बार उसको रीड कर लो, यू विल अंडरस्टैंड दैट पीपीटी इज नाइस, यू कैन सी दैट पीपीटी।
ओके
चलो इसकी, चलो फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन, व्हाट आर हरी सिंह's रिएक्शन टू द prospect of receiving an education? Okay, so what is the prospect? Okay, this answers I will give you afterwards. You will give the class. Students, I will post some extra questions. You have to write the answers on your own. Okay, I will also create an assignment. Please post the assignment. Assignments की भी आपके marks होते हैं. Okay, thank you students for attending to today's lecture. This recording will be available to all the students. Okay, thank you.
Thank you ma'am. Bye ma'am.
Bye bye. Meet you in
Thank you,
July.
ma'am. Bye, ma'am.
Meet you in July.
Okay ma'am.
थैंक यू मैम।
Ma'am, we miss us.
Thank you, ma'am. Good night, ma'am.
Yes, good night. Bye bye.
बाय मैम, गुड नाइट।
Ma'am, we miss you ma'am.